Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Just when you think that things are going to start to slow down, we're going to be kind of in playoff mode. Okay, everybody kind of hunker down for the final stretch. Rumors are going to be a little bit sparse. Can always rely on my Lakers to provide a fresh batch of rumors and drama for us to dive into here. So we are going to talk a bit about what's going on with the Lakers, Russell Westbrook, their front office. We've got a few other things to talk about. The return of Kevin Durant. We'll talk a little bit about some trades that might be being looked at, things of that nature, all kinds of stuff to get into. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA, joined by Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, Jake Fisher, our buddy with Bleacher Report, had quite a bit on the Lakers and their situation, and I guess we might as well just start with Russell Westbrook. And what Jake Fisher says is that there is mutual interest, not just the Lakers being interested, but mutual interest in the Lakers and Russell Westbrook parting ways this off season. Sounds like Russ has not had the best time wearing purple and gold. So, I mean, on one hand, not a surprise, but maybe a little bit more urgency than we had even thought for a move to be made with Russ.
Yeah, what's funny is I kind of would love it if this became a public thing. And the Lakers like it'd be very easy to part ways, decline your player option. You can go wherever you want, right? Like
No.
clearly that's not going to be how this goes, and I'm being very petty with that. But yeah, yeah, right. I mean, okay, like it was I think closer at the trade deadline than we really maybe gave
Mm-hmm.
credit to, that they at least talked enough different options that there was something there, right? We've heard too many versions of trade talks from too many people that all kind of align. That makes sense. So yeah, it makes sense to me. I think Russ wants to go somewhere where I almost said he can be more appreciated, but that's not the right way to phrase it. Just somewhere where he can kind of do more of
Mm-hmm.
his thing, right? And not have to be a third guy when everybody's healthy and those kind of things and all that. And if you're the Lakers, yeah, 100%, I'd like to go a different direction here. It's this getting this right is going to be really important. I think I've said it before on the show, but it's worth repeating. I'd rather see them break that
Yeah.
up into 2, 3, 4 contracts if they can. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if they can, right? If you can't, then maybe two, or all right, take on one contract and see where it goes. I think it might have been floated
Mm-hmm.
in that piece. I don't remember, but I've heard it, seen it around the timeline of could they
Yeah.
just waive and stretch Westbrook? I mean, you're finally Luol Deng's money comes off the books. You don't
I
need
know.
15 plus million sitting on the books, right? It's so funny. I think that was one of the first things like you and I bonded over, right? When we
That's
were
right. Luol Deng.
doing yeah, LeBron cap like math to how they were going to get him, and it was like we got to count in
Mm-hmm.
Luol Deng's 5 million in there. But it was I it's 15 million on the books over the next 3 years. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. That's bad. At worst, you ride out the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Do a John Wall and say you're not going to play. Just going to sit. And go there if you have to. Don't put 15 million plus a year on your books over the next 3 seasons. That's just not worth it. It doesn't make sense. I also had to do some math, just educational portion of the front office show. You can't stretch a contract if it's going to be the stretched amount is for more than 15% of the salary cap in a given season. And it does slide in under that. Under the projection next year is 121 million. So that's roughly 18 million. So it would slide in under that for, poops and giggles. What if they did that with Kendrick Nunn too? Yeah, you could slide in there, but now you're talking, $17 million
Mm-hmm.
on your books for the next 3 seasons, which is just that's not smart, not
No.
worth
So
it.
Ron Gutterman, who does stuff for us here too on the front office show, and I went over this for Lakers Nation today, and we talked all about what would be the benefits of doing something like that. You free up a little bit of room in order to maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable using your
Mhm.
full taxpayer or your non-taxpayer, your full mid-level exception this summer, and then that changes the targets. Maybe you're able to retain a Malik Monk or something like that, but I'd have to imagine that that would not be the first option for the Lakers. Not only is it not great just from a franchise perspective, just from a cap perspective, but optics wise too, which maybe doesn't matter that much at this point, but optics wise, you just gave
Sure.
up stuff to get this guy, and now you're literally paying him to go play basketball somewhere else. That's not great either. So
Mhm.
I don't I don't think that's the way they
I'll
go.
also say
Mhm.
one thing too, just to make sure we're clear on this. If it's 31, people think of it as that turns into 31, $32 million of
Yeah.
cap space. It doesn't, because you still have LeBron and AD on your books for a combined, what is it, 81 million or whatever it is. Then you've got Talon Horton Tucker, that's 10 million. You're basically right at the cap, given you would then have your full mid-level exception and those kind of things. So you're not going to just do this and turn this into all right, now we're in a spot where we've got 30 million in cap space. That's not how this
I'll tell
works.
you, and you mentioned the Luol Deng thing, which just I've literally been asked for years by Lakers fans when does Luol Deng come off the books, and I have a reminder on my calendar and everything. Luol
July
Deng is off
1st.
the books. It's on July 1st. And so then for the Lakers to turn around and add 15 million, almost 16 million of dead money for the next 3 seasons, oh,
Yeah.
that would be rough. But let me ask you this though, before because we do need to move on. But I think it does change things a little bit if Russ also wants out, because then you're going to have Russ, you're going to have his agent, they're going to be
Sure.
looking around for moves as well, canvassing the league. I think it just changes the dynamic a little bit in terms of seeking out a trade from the front office perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, this kind of turns into it's a much more souped
Hmm.
up version of what Boston did last year when they traded Kemba Walker. You're looking for an Al Horford type of player who can come back. That's a lesser player, older. Maybe you feel like, all right, if we get him in here, we can get him bounce back. And that's clearly worked out very well for the Celtics this season. But yeah, that's the kind of thing
Hmm.
you're looking for here in a rush trade if you're going to have to take back a big contract. And then you're getting a team that feels like, hey, maybe we get Russ and, maybe it'll work for us and maybe we can go this direction. Or maybe the team's just pivoting in a completely different direction. It wouldn't surprise me then if, right, because we've talked about it, they can
Hmm.
move 2 first-round picks once we flip to the off season. It wouldn't surprise me if they say, all right, we'll move a pick in a deal to move his contract along somewhere while also
Yeah.
taking some players back. That wouldn't be a huge shock, because I think you're looking at it as we'd rather
Yeah.
just reset everything and we'll deal with the lack of a pick down the line if we have to.
Speaking of resetting everything, it sounds, and this is not a surprise at all, within, according to the Jake Fisher piece, within coaching circles, nobody's expecting Frank Vogel will be back with the Lakers next season, which we talked about
Yeah.
this last offseason when they only gave him a 1 year extension. Regardless of how this season went, the writing was kind of on the wall. A 1 year extension for a coach is not much of a vote of confidence. So that part is not a
Nope.
surprise at all. They did mention that the Lakers are probably looking for a veteran head coach. Again, nothing surprising there. Not a whole lot for us to sink our teeth into, but also mentioned that Rob Pelinka could potentially be on the hot seat. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if they move on because he's so firmly entrenched in the Lakers and has the support of Jeannie Buss and all of that. But interesting to note that perhaps when you look at his record, it hasn't been as all that great in terms of the moves that he's made. So we could be looking at not just a Westbrook trade, not just a roster overhaul, not just a coaching change, but we could see a fairly significant change within the Lakers front office as well as a result of this mess of a season.
Yeah, I think everything's pretty much on the table minus
Mm-hmm.
LeBron and AD. I think there's nothing else that I would look at and be like, whoa, that's a
Right.
major surprise. If, the current member of this team, from front office through the coaching staff, through the playing roster, wasn't there next year other than LeBron and AD, I wouldn't be overly surprised. I think it's we're heading to a point where we're leading to this inevitable breakup at some point. Now, it's funny because I've had a couple people say in my life, like, they just
Mm-hmm.
won a championship 2 years ago. Well, two things in the NBA that might as well have been 10 years ago. And in current times, it might as well have been 2 decades ago.
Player
Like, just the
movement
way it
is,
feels
yeah.
like the world is, right? Feels like every week is an hour plus, or every week is 2 years. Um, I also think too, and this is where I'm gonna play into some franchises are different. That's great. You won a championship 2 years ago. What are you
Mm-hmm.
doing now? Right. And that's where Lakers, Celtics, I almost said Knicks, but no, like they'd like to be in that mix. With that, but
Warriors right now.
Lakers, Celtics, Bulls
Sure.
to some extent, Warriors right now. Yeah, those franchises just operate different. Where it is, all right, we gotta go. Whereas if you're a smaller market, yeah, you might live off of one title for a number of years and feel pretty good about it. So yeah, it does change the kind of the calculus of the way you run an organization. So I'm not surprised. I've seen some reports out there of then does it become one of the members of
Mhm.
Clutch is rumored to be somebody that could take over the Lakers, and that starts to get
Yeah.
kind of messy. Now we've seen the agent to front office
Mhm.
transition a lot over the years. Bob Myers did it, Neil O'Shea did it, Leon Rose now running the Knicks, the Pistons. He was more on the business side, but
Mhm.
Arn Tellem took over and ran a good chunk of the Pistons operation. So we have seen it. It just gets into a whole now, boy, now you're really mixing business, pleasure, family, friends, however you want to work it. It's all getting mixed in there a little too much for me, where that gets to be a pretty
Yeah,
tangled
and
web.
the Lakers have long relied on sort of the family tree essentially in terms of whenever they're going to fill a position, they
Mm-hmm.
find somebody that they already know. Somebody that they already know. So that's
Yep.
where the name got thrown out there. Omar Wilkes, who's Jamal Wilkes' kid, that got put in there because he's high up in Clutch Sports right now, and maybe there's a connection there. But
Yep.
I thought, and just as behind the curtain or whatever, Jake Fisher did a really nice job of explaining why of saying first of all just being forthright and saying, but I'm getting conflicting information on this. Some people are saying it's not, that's not the case, and then explaining why, because there's this interagency
Yeah.
battle or between agencies battle, and that he might some of
Yep.
the info he's getting may have had an ulterior motive, and so I thought he did a nice job of explaining why that might be the case. So,
Absolutely. I do
mhm.
wonder if you were the Lakers, like, and I know there's history there with the way things ended, but like I gotta wonder, would there ever be a point where they would be like, "Hey, Pat Riley, what would it take to come back?" But the problem is, I don't think Pat Riley wants to do the
Right.
day to day running of the team. Not that he isn't heavily involved in the Heat, but I think it is there. There's a lot of other people there that do a lot more of the stuff, and then Pat Riley kind of comes in. We've heard all the stories, right? He comes in and dumps his championship rings on the table and kind of says, "You want one of these? Come on here and join us," and
Hmm.
kind of closes things out. He's clearly done a very good job there. But yeah, I do kind of wonder at times, where could you go? I mean, we heard rumors that the Celtics, when it was Danny Ainge might be leaving, maybe making a run
Yeah.
at Sam Presti. If you're the Lakers, would you
Hey,
do something like
LeBron likes
that?
him.
I mean,
I said LeBron likes
what's
him,
that?
right?
Yeah, yeah, clearly, yeah. LeBron's a fan. I mean, LeBron might want what's the Rams
That's
guy,
right.
Les Snead, to come over too. He's a fan of him apparently as well. The reality is, there's only 30 of these
Mhm.
jobs anyway. If one of the 30 is the Lakers, they're not going to
Yeah.
have a real hard time filling it with a really, really good person to run the show there. It's just, that's just the reality of it.
All right. If you guys want more on the Lakers topics, the general manager situation, Russell Westbrook, the trade possibilities there, Ron Gutterman and I, we went way in depth over on the Lakers Nation channel. Over the course of 2 videos, we spent almost 40 minutes breaking down all of the things and all the intricacies within the Lakers. So if you want a deep dive there, go check that out over on the Lakers Nation YouTube channel. But let's, well, kind of move on. LeBron,
That's front office show length of detail, man. We're bleeding
I'm
over to
telling you,
Lakers
man,
Nation.
it's
I
telling
love
you, we get together and we start talking, and I told him as soon as we finished, I'm like, dude, we just spent like 40 minutes talking about these two stories. He's like, that's what happens when we start talking Lakers. You never know.
it. And
Yes,
it's big stuff, right? I mean, this isn't you didn't spend 40
no,
minutes on DJ Augustin and
no,
Wenyen
and a lot of
Gabriel,
it was
I'm sure.
breaking down. Okay,
So
what does this contract look like? What would this mean? And there's
yeah, of course.
we get into the
Hmm.
weeds.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
LeBron last night after the loss to the Dallas Mavericks mentioned that he's not shutting things down on the season or anything. There's been some talk about, should LeBron just kind of pack it up, bubble wrap himself, and then get ready for next season. So he's no plans to do that. Not a surprise. Some people will point and say, well, he wants to chase Kareem's record. How big of a factor that is, I don't know. But we also heard that there's some within the Lakers organization that still feel like, hey, if AD gets healthy and we have LeBron and AD, there's still a puncher's chance in the playoffs, which probably isn't incorrect. It's not likely that they go far based on what we've
Yeah.
seen, but I don't think that LeBron shutting down, if they had, say, a top 10 protected pick that would go back to them, okay, maybe there's some incentive to shut him down, but
Different
that's
story.
that's not the
Yep.
case.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, the reality is LeBron's not going to go out there and play, selfish, like throwing up every
Hmm.
shot, never passing basketball. But I have no problem if LeBron's like, hey, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to continue to put up 25, 30
Hmm.
points a night and continue to close in on history. And to me, that's making the most of a lost season to some extent. You might as
Yeah.
well, right? It's not going to hurt anything, And if it turned into, LeBron is going full, world be free here to dip back into a guy from when I was learning the game who just would fire shots from
Hmm.
everywhere. It was maybe the most selfish player I've ever seen. That would be a whole different story. Then it'd be like, all right, come on, now you're turning it into a joke. But if he goes out and just keeps doing what he's doing and, continues to close in on the scoring record, why not?
And from a Lakers perspective, the reason why, like, I would be okay with this, with him continuing to do that, and some people roll their eyes and say, oh, he just wants the record. He's a free agent as of right now. Maybe it changes this summer, but as of right now, he's a free agent in 2023. He's on pace to pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the all-time scoring record next season. Now, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
health plays a huge role in that, but
Sure.
if he, say, shuts it down this season and then suddenly there's an injury next season, you increase the chances that he passes that record, which would be a massive moment in the NBA, wearing someone else's jersey. Now, and again, maybe
Yep.
he has it in his head that he's going to stay with the Lakers for the next 5 years. I don't know, but I think the preference would be from a Lakers perspective that if that's going to happen, it happens while he's wearing a Lakers jersey. So,
I agree. Yep.
all right, moving on.
Now let's talk
Let's
about a
talk
different
about a
team.
different
Go
team.
ahead.
Let's talk about your Celtics' favorite team, at least as of last night, the Hawks. Bogdan Bogdanovic says
Half a favorite
they
team.
they forgot how to win basketball games. If you watched, sorry to bring
Yeah.
them up again, if you watched the last 7 minutes of Lakers Mavs, you would say the same thing about the Los Angeles Lakers, who scored 4 points in that stretch. But the Hawks have been struggling and obviously haven't been what we thought they would be this season. And the Celtics certainly helped them look not great. It really looked like the Hawks kind of ran out of ideas. And part of that is the Celtics defense has been fantastic. And when they really turned it on, Atlanta got pretty lost out there.
Yeah, I mean, just to give a quick rundown, the Hawks didn't score for the first 3 minutes of the game, but right before they got their first basket, Jaylen Brown went out. He sprained his ankle on a play. It looked like it was a lot worse. It was a non-contact play. He just stepped super awkwardly as he was going up for a layup. He took kind of like a real
Mm-hmm.
wide step. I think he was kind of caught between a Euro step and a straight step, and he went down. Looked like it was really bad. Thankfully, it's only a sprained ankle. They're saying he'll miss Thursday night's game against the Grizzlies, but then he'll be back. And then the Celtics kind of looked like they were a little shell shocked and didn't know what to do and were kind of trying to figure things out. And the Hawks had a 14-point halftime lead. After halftime, Atlanta scored 33 points, shot 33% from the field, and only like two
Mm-hmm.
of seen from three, and they did not miss open shots either. Boston was on everything that they were trying to do. They really locked in. If you're a fan of defense and if you like switching defense that's super connected and playing on a string, go watch the second half of that game because the Celtics. It was that's one I think you might have some coaches using as coaches tape for other teams, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
they envisioned, right? That's what Brad Stevens tried to build was this team that can switch 1 through 5 and everybody can hold their own and off they go and they really do because the other thing is even when a guy like Peyton Pritchard's out there is like 6 foot 1 inch point guard, they'll switch him if he's covering Trey Young on a Clint Capella because they trust they can scram him
Mm-hmm.
out of it backside by bringing in whether it be Williams or Horford or Grant Williams or even Tatum into those possessions and just live with it. So it was pretty good. But yeah, for the Hawks side, they're
Yeah.
just not the same team that they were a year ago, and it's one of those things where you kind of wonder, was that the year, right? Did they peak, and is that the best it's ever going to be for them? I kind of think they're a sneaky team
Yeah.
to watch this summer because they're getting to be very expensive. I think that's a story that's not being really covered enough. with them is they've got a lot of money on the books already for next season that they project to be, before they kind of do anything else, about 7 million or so over the tax line. Now they can waive Danilo Gallinari, but that's waiving a productive player. And then you got to replace them. But they're tough, and why they're there, right? New deal for John Collins. They signed a bunch of free agents, but then they have over 50 million in contract extensions kicking in for Trae Young and Kevin Huerter next year. So it's it's not the wrong path because those guys are all good players, but there's going to be changes coming to the Hawks.
They spent last summer feeling pretty good about what they had accomplished and thinking, okay, this is it moving forward. Let's go. And rightfully so. Yeah. Sorry.
Two summers ago. But yeah, I know it all runs
at
together.
At this point, it does. But they felt pretty good about their future, and rightfully so. And now this season, they may be questioning that.
In the East Finals.
So we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
Let's get into Devin Booker, who unfortunately is now entering health and safety protocols. Already missing Chris Paul. Fortunately, the Suns still have a nice cushion in the Western Conference, so I don't think they're gonna slide too far. But I mean, we'll see how long Booker is out, because he's been their main ball handler without Chris Paul. So now they're really going to be in a tough spot.
Yeah, now they've been, like you said, fortunate and have a nice cushion. They built that 6.5 game lead, and the Warriors have also lost 2 in a row. So they have not made up any ground on them. So the Suns should be fine. They've only got 21 games to play with that 6.5 game lead. So I think they're going to be fine to finish at the top of the conference. And unless Devin Booker gets a really bad case of COVID, he's probably out for a week to 10 days, right, at most. And it could be one of those where it comes back and it's like it was a false positive, or it was just a close contact. Close contact case or whatever, and they go from there. So yeah, I think everything will be fine for Phoenix, but just something they're gonna have to get through for the next little bit. They've got Portland tonight, so. The Portland prominently figuring into the Western Conference pillow fight for the last play-in spot.
Right after, now the NBA made the decision that Thursday night, no thank you, we do not want to see the Brooklyn Nets and the Miami Heat, or I guess TNT probably made this decision. We do not want to see the Brooklyn Nets and the Miami Heat. Instead, we're going to watch the Grizzlies and the Celtics, which, by the way, I'm excited about that matchup. It's going to be fantastic, but in part, the Nets injury situation probably was a factor. And now,
they're at home.
That too. But now, welcome back Kevin Durant. He's going to be playing against the Miami Heat on Thursday night. So first, I mean, just great players healing up, returning to the floor, always something we want to see. But ironic in the wake of that game being the one that got bumped off of the schedule for national television.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really starting tonight as we're recording this on Wednesday night. So hopefully you listen to this before games start. The Heat have a tricky 2-game road trip now. They go to Milwaukee, so that's a test. And then they're going to go to Brooklyn with Kevin Durant back. Ben Simmons, still no word on when he may play. Kyrie Irving obviously will know because it's a home game for the Nets. But yeah, I mean, little test for Miami here on back to back. And that's not it's not like a super far trip, but that's also not one of these, LA to Phoenix trips either, where it's, you're right there or anything like that, or a Boston to New York trip or anything. So I'm very curious to see how the Heat come through. I'll be, definitely checking out a good chunk of both of those games.
All right. Should be an exciting one to watch, but Zion Williamson, let's jump to that. So the Pelicans announced that he is showing improvement and soon to progress to basketball activity, but still no return timeline. I mean, progressing to basketball activity, that's great, but we're really running out of space here, running out of time here in the season. I'm at a point where even if he's returning to basketball activity soon, does he get back in time? Do they bother putting him back out there if there's a couple weeks left in the season?
The only way I see it is if this is a Paul George situation where we want to get him a couple confidence games in and feeling good about getting into next season, maybe. Now, it looks like they're going to be right in that play-in race all the way through. I mean, that they're right now they're leading. Well, I guess they're tied with the Blazers, but they must have the
Hmm.
tiebreaker, so they're ahead of Portland. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe you bring them back for that reason, if you really feel like it, but they're clearly not going to do anything unless
Hmm.
he's 100% ready to go. And I just, like you said, we're running out of time here. I mean, they didn't say, right, when the next update would be, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Um, yeah, just that's, he will gradually progress to full weight bearing exercise and basketball activities. Yeah, that tells me that's probably another 2 weeks before we get to that point, and then yeah, I don't think he plays this year. Would be my guess.
So last year we got play-in tournament gold essentially because the NBA got Lakers versus Warriors in the play-in, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it was a close game all the way down the stretch, everything. So that was like the ideal scenario for the NBA. The ideal NBA scenario right now, at least for the Western Conference, is Zion returns and you get LeBron versus Zion, and then
Oh
the
yeah,
Lakers survive and the Clippers lose to the Wolves in the 7-8 spot and you get Lakers versus Clippers, loser goes home in the play.
yeah.
That is the dream scenario for the NBA as far as the play-in tournament goes.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, that's what you want to have. And I mean, that's the play-in tournament has kind of become must watch, right? Because it's as close to in the NBA as we get to
Mm-hmm.
March Madness, right? So it really kind of turns into a thing where yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, let's go. I mean, I considering I have very little rooting interest in that. I want the games to be as fun and interesting as possible. So, yeah, let's go. It's funny. I've even seen some people saying, you imagine if the Pelicans knock the Lakers out and then the Lakers move up just enough that their pick goes to the
Oh,
Pelicans. Like that would be, what a side plot that would be, right? To that whole
the
story.
tangled web we weave here in the NBA.
That's it.
Um,
We are gonna do. I should use that. We'll do a little teaser here. We're gonna do a show maybe tomorrow. We'll try to work it in if it's a lighter
mhm.
news day on where all the picks that have protections attached to them stand right now going into everything down the stretch because there's a lot of picks that are potentially changing hands this year and this upcoming NBA draft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's get to the New York Knicks. There's a report out there that the Knicks, teams around the NBA, are not sure that the Knicks have enough pieces in order to trade for a star this offseason. And obviously, this season has not gone according to plan. So maybe a big move could shake things up. But when you look at what the Knicks have, we're looking at Evan Fournier and Julius Randle, Kemba Walker's
Mm-hmm.
contract, RJ Barrett's, still a young player. But what do you think? I mean, are the Knicks? I guess first, should the Knicks really be trying to target a star right now? Is that the best path forward for them? And then, do they have the assets or the firepower to get that done?
I guess it depends on the
Mm-hmm.
star. If it's an aging star, like let's play the game. Let's say Damian Lillard says he wants out. No, like I don't think that makes a lot of sense for the Knicks necessarily. I don't know that that's where I would want to be giving up everything it would take to get Damian Lillard. If it was, man, it's tough because of the injury stuff. But I was gonna say if it was Zion, I'm probably more inclined to say, yeah, go
Mm-hmm.
get him, right? And see what you could build. Wouldn't it be weird if they then kind of flipped and went all in to go get Zion after they traded away Kristaps Porzingis in a very similar-ish
Uh-huh.
circumstance there? But the reality is they do have all their own picks. So that gives you a lot of options, right? Because you can start doing picks and swaps and everything as far as 7 years out. They do have an extra Dallas pick coming their way, but it's top 10 protected for a few years before it comes to them. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we got to assume Dallas is probably going to be in the top, or the 10 best teams in the league moving forward as long as they have Luka, or at least in that range. So that pick doesn't look like it's going to be very good there. So yeah, it's one of those things where as I look at it, I get where they're coming from. There's just not you're not sitting on that superstar young kid who's like, all right, he just needs a chance to blow up. They don't even have a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander type where it's like, yeah, this guy can be the centerpiece of a trade along with a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of picks that delivers you, Paul George if you're the Clippers in that case. So yeah, I do think it's a little gonna be a little hard for them to make moves. Good news is none of their contracts
Yeah.
are bad. right? So you could start to you could put 3 4 of them together and go get somebody. It's funny because I'm sure the wheels are turning. Like I mean, they look like a natural
I was just
Westbrook
gonna say
spot,
that.
right? But just don't do it, New York.
Shh!
Don't do
Don't
it.
tell them that, Keith. Come on. Come on. No. That's
Sorry.
that's the team that that's the team that a lot of Lakers fans do point to. Well, maybe they would want Russ, and I keep saying that's the Knicks of a few years ago are doing that
Yeah.
move, and
Yep.
we gave them so much credit for not doing stuff like that in the last season starting really. I don't know that they go back to doing stuff like that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there with them.
Yeah.
Last thing we've got.
Absolutely.
The 76ers this offseason are expected to pursue a trade with Tobias Harris. I guess let's get into why, cap wise. Why would you?
Well, there's your
There's
Knicks
there
guy.
it is. There's the Knicks guy.
There it
Actually,
is. Bring him home.
so
Can I say
yeah.
something real quick? There was a point when 2 seasons ago when Kemba Walker and Tobias Harris were free
Mhm.
agents, where that was very much believed to be the Knicks like plan
Oh,
was a Kemba Walker, Tobias Harris, bring them both home, build the team around them, and I mean, they kind of got Kemba in the end, but yeah, that I don't think would have gone all that well. You
no.
might not even have gotten last year's fun playoff appearance. But
Yes.
sorry
No,
to
no, you're
interrupt
fine.
you.
I was just going to say that Ron Gutterman, who does some stuff here for us here at the front office show, is going to be doing an in-depth breakdown of some different potential landing
Yeah,
spots and one of them is the Knicks for Tobias Harris. So we'll see what he comes up with there in terms of landing spots for them. But why would the 76ers look to move off of Tobias Harris? It's contractual, obviously, because his production hasn't been quite what they hoped it would be this season,
uh huh.
but still, in terms of being kind of a rangy, switchy, big wing, I mean, he's essentially his skill set is what a lot of teams are looking for in a player. Just his efficiency isn't quite there, at least not this season.
Yeah, that's it. He needs a lot of touches to kind of get going. And if you're building a Harden and Embiid centric roster, there's just not a lot more touches to go around. You ideally, I think now, if you're the Sixers, you want to fill out that roster with one secondary
Mm-hmm.
creator. That's Tyrese Maxey. You have that guy. Then shooter 3-and-D guys the rest of the way, right? That's all you want. 3-and-D players, Danny Green in
Yeah.
his prime kind of guys, right? Probably not Danny Green now, but Danny Green in his prime kind of players. That's a little hard to get, right? Those guys can be hard to come by, but they're even harder to come by when you have Harris on the books for 37.6 next year and 39.2 the year after, nearly $77 million owed over the next 2 seasons to Tobias Harris. So that's why, right? That's a let's move him. Let's break that contract
Mm-hmm.
up into some pieces and let's go a direction. It was funny. I had somebody actually they sent me an email, which happens on occasion. They're like, wouldn't it make sense for the 76ers to trade Tobias Harris, fully guarantee Danny Green, and trade them for Russell Westbrook?
No.
And I was just like, no, that wouldn't make sense for the 76ers side of that. Like, we've already seen the Harden Westbrook
Yeah.
thing didn't work great. And then you're going to thanks Joel Embiid, you will never touch the ball unless it's an offensive rebound, right? Like, that's not a
But there's
thing
going to
that
be a lot of
should
those to
happen.
have.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of
Oh
offensive
yeah, probably.
rebounds.
That is true. Good point. Now, if I was the Lakers, yes,
Oh yeah.
thank you. We
Uh-huh.
accept and go. That's even with I know Lakers fans don't really care for all that much for Danny Green, but you
Oh
let Danny
no,
Green kind of go out to
Keith, it's come
pasture.
back around.
You know?
It's come back. We've
Yeah.
gone full circle
Oh no.
now.
Well,
And Lakers
yeah.
fans now, I'm telling you, this is the discussion that I'm seeing among Lakers Nation is fans talking about, gosh, can remember back when we had Danny Green and KCP and that was the line and LeBron and
And
AD.
KCP had the no trade
Yep.
clause and could block
Right. And
trades.
those were the
Oh
days. And
man.
people and then invariably somebody, 6, 7, 8 comments down will say, "What are you talking about? Everybody was trying to get rid of Danny Green and they were so mad at him for missing that
Yeah.
shot in game 5 and all that kind of stuff."
The good old days when everybody loved them when they won a
Yes.
championship 5 minutes from my
Yes.
house.
Yep.
I love
Um,
it.
in
Oh
any
man.
in any event, we'll see what they can do. You mentioned skill set wise fitting. Yeah, essentially instead of Tobias Harris, who's again close-ish to what you're looking for, but instead of a Tobias Harris, you're looking for a Mikal Bridges, a Finney
Yeah.
Smith, and somebody like
Yeah.
that that can just kind of be that role player, that high-level role player. That's the better fit based on the personnel that the 76ers currently have with James Harden. So, um,
And I think you can get
mhm,
something done for Tobias Harris, provided you're willing to take, maybe you take back one questionable
yeah.
deal coming back your way, where it's a guy who maybe makes 10, $15 million and should probably be a $5 or $6 million guy. And you kind of live with it and say, all right, we can, carry that one. It's just, taking back, another giant contract. That's probably not what they're looking to do. Cause I think they get shaping up where they're looking and saying, all right, we got to start building out our depth around these two guys, because that's what we're gonna need. And the reality is, I mean, we already talked all about the DeAndre Jordan stuff, but they got to nail down a good backup
Mm.
center for next year. Because you can't build a team that's super shallow with those two guys, knowing they're probably a good bet to miss anywhere from 15 to 25 games, each in a season. So you just want to be really careful the way you build your roster. But I mean, Daryl Morey's done really well around the edges with players over the years, so I trust that they'll figure it out.
If I'm them, you know who I'm going after? It's Robert Covington. Not necessarily in a Tobias Harris trade, but just as a piece. And I know they already had
Bring them
him,
back.
but bringing him
Yeah.
back in, because then you've got a guy who can play the four if you want to, can back up at the five in a pinch if you need, can still give you the floor spacing
Hmm.
to take advantage of something. He'd be a really
Sure.
interesting fit there. And again, I'm not saying you try to do some sign and trade with Harris or whatever, but just in terms of a guy who could fit and check some boxes for them, I think he would work real well there.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is if you move Harris and you can clear just enough, you could get to in range of using the
Mm-hmm.
full mid level too, which would I would assume probably some level of goal for them, because you could waive Danny Green and then you get into situations where, without going too deep into it, but you could get
Yeah.
into range if you make the right kind of trade with Tobias Harris to do something where you break that up, maybe don't take back quite as much money and go. So yeah, I think it's Philly kind of is. I mean, they'll add, sounds like DeAndre Jordan, so they kind of are what they are for the rest of
Mm.
this year. But yeah, they're in a spot to be a pretty interesting team this summer, because we've been talking about it, right? There's not a ton of good high end free agents, but there are a lot of really good
Yep.
role players available this
Yep.
offseason.
And not a lot of money. So there might be some potential out there to
No,
get some of these
exactly.
guys on a
Yep, you're gonna get
yeah,
some
on a
bargains.
bargain deal.
Yep. Yeah, you might be able to even split up the mid level, at 10 million
Mm-hmm.
bucks, split that into two good players for, five a piece or 6 and 4 or something.
Yeah. Especially if they're coming off of a deep playoff run. They're going to be an attractive landing
Hmm.
spot.
Yep, without a doubt.
All right. I think that about does it for today. Appreciate everybody joining us. Make sure that you do subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office Show. Turn on those notifications. And once again, follow us over on Apple Podcasts. Give us that 5-star review. We definitely appreciate it. That really does help us out. Leave us a review as well. Go ahead and write some stuff to us. We'll read some of them here on the show. We really appreciate those. And of course, if you listen via other platforms, whether it's Spotify or whatever, you can follow us there and give us a rating there as well. Till next time, everybody, stay safe and see you.